We'll call tonight's city council work session to order and a public hearing. Welcome everyone. We're glad to see you out here participating in the democratic process. So just as a preliminary few remarks, obviously we're here to propose certified tax rate change, increase, speaking euphemistically, but a couple of things I just wanted to say. I'm not here to try to convince you to be happy about a tax increase. We're all residents of the city, and none of us are eager to pay more money, but there are a couple reasons why I do believe and why I recommended to the City Council that this is a necessary change. So the first, and some of these will seem obvious, but the city engages in certain essential services, and they just have to take place. They're not really optional for us to engage in some of the snowplow efforts in our fire department. I mean, the maintenance of the road, even though that we are having to make some considerable cutbacks this year just to try to offset some of the increased expense. And that leads me to my second point, is that, as everyone knows, costs have increased across the board, and we're not immune to that. I mean, your costs increasing, our costs increase in the operation of the government. The third reason that I would say this is necessary is, it's very easy to say, well, make cuts. And since I've been serving as mayor, the one thing that I have noticed is that Woodland Hills, or not noticed, observed, is that Woodland Hills runs very lean. It's something where it's very difficult to find areas where you can trim fat. I put Wayne on the spot a lot, and I'm going to again. Wayne is essentially a full-time city employee, and he gets no compensation. He's involved in arranging contracts with developers, negotiating contracts with developers. He's very involved in our legal matters. Frankly, if Wayne decides he's had his fill and hangs it up, I don't know where we would be without him. But he's free, and so when it comes to where we would make cuts, it's very difficult to say, well, this is obviously an unnecessary expense, and we'll cut it, because we are operating at really, I mean, it's all lean. And then, as we talked about repeatedly, as I doubt is news to anybody, I mean, we also have an exceptional expense this year that we've had to budget a sizable amount of money for, and that's legal. I wish I could report that things are settling down, but we're actually in kind of a crescendo right now, and that, in my opinion, is one of the most unnecessary and a self-inflicted wound that we really could live without, in my opinion. But that is something that really makes this year an outlier too, is that we have that we just have to pay attorneys to respond to these allegations, and we've attempted settlement. We just had a mediation this last week, and we were just miles apart, and it just is. It's not something that is realistically in our future. So that's something that we just have to accept as part of where we are. So I do want to give the city council members that would like to offer any input, by show of hands, are there any here that have not seen the video presentation that Glenn Anderson prepared? Okay, well, good, because I'm actually we're going to show it, because Glenn is a very gifted video maker, filmmaker, and he did a great job in what I think is an excellent explanation of kind of where we are and why we are doing what we feel we need to do. So anyway, council members, do any of you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you have anything, I'd invite you to say something.
Video, and then we can answer any questions.
Okay, Jody, can we roll film?
Yeah, lights. Thanks. Work.
I need the mic up there, Jody.
Don't look hot, this is just a second. Hold it.
Too long to go over all the numbers, but in this video we'll do welcome to this year's budget tour. Now, it'd take too long to go over all the numbers, but in this video we'll do two things. First, we hope to cover what you'll need to know to understand the budget, and second, we'll review some of the specific items we think you'll be most interested in. As we mentioned last year, budgets can be hard to interpret, and city budgets in particular are kind of an odd duck. So we got some help from Councilman Dave Pratt, the liaison to our finance committee, and from Chris Helby, our finance director. We'll be sharing with you what we learned from them. Okay, so the city's main operational budget is on these first 4 pages. For the video, we'll switch the columns together to make things a little easier to read. Notice first that our fiscal year goes from July 1st to June 30th. But even though half of the budget year is in 2022, we still call this the 2023 budget. Now let's look at these columns on the right. This first one shows how much we ended up spending in 2022, or how much we estimate we'll spend, because some of the 2022 bills still haven't come in yet. That's one reason why the amounts here could differ from this column, which shows what was budgeted. Next, we'll see how much we've spent for the 2023 budget so far. That's all zeros because this report was actually printed before the start of the fiscal year. Finally, this last column shows what we budgeted for 2023. Everything on these pages is divided into 2 parts. The first part's revenue, all the money we expect to come in. About $1.75 million so it. The second part is expenditures, all the money budgeted to go out. Again, about $1.75 million. And at the end, we have the change in net position. That's the difference between how much comes in and how much goes out. That should be zero because state law requires a balanced budget. So why does it show that we're $500 in the hole? Chris tells me that was a computing error that's already been fixed. We'll see a couple of these as we go along, and that's one reason why this budget is temporary. It isn't absolutely finalized. The other reason is that we'll have a truth and taxation hearing in August, and it's after that that the city council votes to adopt the final budget. Okay, now let's look at some of this year's numbers. First, revenue. How much money do we expect to take in? These are all the city's different money sources, things like license and permit fees, charges for services the city provides. Intergovernmental revenue is money we get from the county and the state, and of course we have property taxes. Notice that to balance our budget, the mayor's asking for a tax increase of about $67,000 over 2022. Why? Well, inflation is causing some of that, especially construction inflation for city improvements and maintenance. That inflation is running up to 4 times what you and I see at the grocery store. And we'll see some other reasons for the tax increase when we go through our expenditures. But here's something to put that increase in perspective. These are some of last year's numbers. Notice we budgeted a tax increase of about $34,000. But to balance the budget, we projected we'd also have to drain over $277,000 from our city savings account. Ouch. That was shown here under appropriation of fund balance. But look, this year's numbers show what actually happened. With additional property taxes from new homes and some responsible fiscal management, that savings withdrawal actually drops to just $65,000. It's shown here at the end of our expenditures under transfers. And what's even better, this isn't really a withdrawal at all. It's just money we're transferring into other city savings accounts, earmarking those funds for future needs. We'll talk about specifics when we get to that part of the budget, but the bottom line is that we've cut our savings account drain basically down to zero, and that's a phenomenal benefit for all of us. Okay, back up to revenue. One final thing you might notice here is this $55,000 we'll get from property taxes prior year. What's that? Well, the state actually allows people to be 3.5 years behind on their taxes before taking any action against them. So this money is from late taxes we expect to collect in 2023. Okay, now let's move to expenditures budget. Under administrative salaries and wages, we're budgeting $95,000 less than last year, even though we hired one more office staff. How does that work? Well, a couple of things. First, for a while there, to get everything done, our office people were working overtime and getting paid time and a half. Now with one more employee, we eliminate overtime and get more hours of work done for less money. Second, we've begun to bill some of our office work under other budgets. For example, let's skip ahead to our water budget for a second. For 2022, we budgeted $85,000 for salaries and wages, but for 2023, it's up to $120,000. Why? That increase is to cover our office staff processing water bills and things like that. So to pay for that, we've moved some of the expense that used to be in administrative over here to water. Back to administrative. This line's for attorney's fees, and our budget here is up to $150,000. This is one of our biggest expenses, and it's based on the monthly numbers that have been trending since the beginning of the year. Although the city uses legal services for several things, most of this expense is from legal action connected to the ongoing neighbor dispute we talked about last year. A further complication here is that the city's insurance companies told us they'll no longer cover any of the costs from this case. We've submitted an appeal, but right now it looks like we'll be paying out of pocket for this from here on out. So like last year, this represents one of our biggest budget items. That same legal action is driving most of the expense on this line too, administrative professional services. The city uses several of these services, but the biggest expenses come from outside engineers advising the city on technical aspects of the neighbor dispute case. Down here in the building section, we have a new $40,000 expense called SWPPP. That means Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. For years, Woodland Hills was small enough we didn't worry about this, but we're bigger now. So the state makes us hire an inspector to guard against harmful runoff from building sites in the city. That's a lot of money, but it's not really an expense. Here's why. If we look at our revenue under SWPPP, we also have $40,000 coming in from contractors who actually pay for this service. That's what we call a pass-through. One amount coming in and the same amount going out again. Our budget actually has several of those. We also have some of our city employees' salary and wages in the building section, along with Social Security, retirement, and health insurance. You'll see similar entries under public safety, fire, emergency medical services, roads, snow plowing, and parks. That's because our city employees do work in all these areas, so they have parts of their salaries paid out of several of these different budgets. Under fire equipment, we're budgeting $45,000, even though we only spent about $28,000 for 2022. Actually, our fire chief submits a detailed budget of his own every year for that full amount. This is one of those situations where some of the bills may not have come in yet. Also, the chief applies for lots of grants, and those may have offset some of these costs. Also in this section, we have money from a very kind resident who donated $1,800 for our 2023 firefighter appreciation event. And you'll notice a new $2,000 expense here for emergency management. That's because a new state law requires us to have an emergency manager that attends 2 conferences a year, and this money covers food, lodging, and registration. Councilman Carrie Malkovich has volunteered for this, and she's covering her own time, gas, and mileage, which is extremely generous. Roads is another of our big increases, so let's look at that. Fortunately, many of our roads got redone with our water system upgrade, but our research has shown that just to properly maintain the remaining roads, our Public Works Director will need about $278,000 in general maintenance funds. That really would have cranked up our taxes, so we're combining budget items to try and meet that need. Only $86,000 from general maintenance instead of $278,000, and about $100,000 from Class C road funds. These come from state gasoline taxes. That gets us about 2/3 of the full amount to work with, and we use our trucks for snow plowing, roads, and water, we split that payment among all those budgets. So here's $18,000 under snowplow capital equipment, then under roads capital equipment, and finally under water capital equipment. By the way, we budgeted more for snowplow equipment last year because we also invested in the salt stacker, which should save us money over the next several years. This last section contains that $65,000 in transfers we talked about earlier. Here's where we try to set aside money for future expenses involving parks, roads, snow plowing, emergency medical services, and eventually any fire truck. And at the end of the budget, we find a separate page for each of these areas showing each of the transfers. But what are all these numbers listed on the roads page? Well, these are actually 2022 road monies that we hope to spend by June 30th. But because we're a small town, sometimes road contractors put us off till the end of the construction season. So this item allows us to roll that money over to the 2023 budget and spend it when the workers become available. Oh, and we also have a page for the mitigation project, even though we show all zeros for 2023, because that was all wrapped up in 2022. That leaves just two more pages, one for water and one for sewer. Those are similar because they're self-sustaining. We don't use property taxes to fund them. Sewer is the simpler of the two. It's one of those pass-throughs. We gather the payments and pass them all along to Payson City, who provides our sewer service. Actually, the numbers on this page don't quite add up. That's another of those computing errors, and it should be fixed in the final budget. Like sewer, water has its own self-contained budget. But here's something significant to notice. We build into this budget what's called a depreciation expense. That's money we set aside each year to save toward the cost of replacing our water system when it wears out. And even setting aside those funds, water is still projected to be over $38,000 in the black by the end of the budget year. It's good to have that surplus because over the past few years, water line failures and the need for repairs have been hard to predict. So those are some things we hope will be helpful in making sense of our 2023 budget. As you look it over on your own, you might have other questions, and if you do, any of our city council members would be happy to answer them. Just give them a call or send an email. Welcome to this year's budget. Now, it'll take too long to go over all the numbers, but in this video we'll do two things. First, we hope to...
Jane, would you like to notes?
Thanks, Jody. Okay, well, I hope that was illuminating for everyone. I again really appreciate Glenn's talents and willingness to share them. What we can do now is we can just open this up for some public comment, public discussion. You're welcome to come and use the microphone. I think the venue is probably small enough that everyone will hear you, especially if you raise your voice, which might happen. So on this side of the room, is there anybody that would care to make a comment? Yeah, Sherry.
Mine has to do with water. It's my understanding that line items pertaining to water have to stay with water and can't be transferred to another line, is that correct?
That's my understanding as well, and Chris is nodding, and that, I think, makes it truth.
Okay, so there's 105, something having to do with billing of the water bills that went into administrative. If that all doesn't get used, where does it go?
Yeah,
Are you talking
I'm
about the salaries portion? So there's 4 employees that bounce back and forth between the two accounts. And so they're definitely, and not only the employees, but also the vehicles, the trucks, some of the equipment.
Hey, Chris, I'm sorry to cut you off, and Sherry, we've got people that are online that can't hear what's being said, so actually you do need to come up and use the microphone. So can we just rewind this and you come up and use the microphone and ask that same question? We'll pretend the last few seconds never happened. Is that still good for the camera, Jody? We're good?
Yeah, they're good.
Okay, my questions have to do with water, and the water line items cannot be transferred to other lines. administrative salaries was one of them. If we don't use that, where does the extra money go? And the other question that I have is, I think, Chris, was there a surplus of like 38,000 in water?
Projected this year. yes.
Projected. Does that take into account all the vacant lots that are being billed, the maintenance fee, and some of those are not paying? How's that gonna work?
So as far as the salaries, some of the cities utilize their electricity, their electric companies to supplement the general fund. We don't do that with our water, that stands on its own. As far as the overages, if there's money left over, it goes in what's called a fund balance. In the business, it's called retained earnings and can be used later. We do have a pretty healthy savings plan for the water account that we utilized $300 and some odd thousand this year to start replacing Maple Drive and some of those other places on top of the loan that the state gave us. And so we're replenishing that right now, but we had about $790,000 in that before we spent that. So the monies that are left over will be utilized for the next year in that account.
But it has to specifically stay in water.
Water, yes.
Okay, and do you, let's see, how long have we had that maintenance fee raised? Has it been a year?
It's about 18 months,
18
something like that.
months of the, and I'm guessing 300 lots, just to use a round number, that are not developed in Woodland Hills. What percentage have been
So I'm
paying
guessing about
that?
50% or.
Actually, we're collecting, quite well on those lots. There's probably a handful that are not paying.
So it's even better, good.
Okay.
So that was figured into the loan when we got it with the division of drinking water, the empty lots.
Okay.
The future loan.
Thanks, Sherry. Thanks, Chris. Okay, anybody else on this side? We'll move over to this side. Okay, well, very good. Council, do any of you have anything you'd like to offer now?
Jake.
Okay, Jan's starting a day, Jan, so.
He's over finance.
Believe me, I don't wanna be over anything. But I will say that I really enjoy working with the finance committee, who are really sharp guys and ladies that are able to kind of help us vet our budget, and I really appreciate that. The one thing I will make a comment, again, I read Facebook, and every once in a while there's a comment out there, and, sometimes I'll respond, and other times I'm just like, don't kick a sleeping dog, So, but in this case, the one comment that was made was, the city should, live within their budget, and they should cut back because this is, inflation has gone crazy, and believe me, I pay property taxes too, so I get that comment. The interesting thing that I think about it is, oftentimes we don't think about the fact that the city gets hit by that inflation too. I mean, we fuel up our trucks down at Chevron, we have to get oil, we have to buy tires, and we're paying the same price as you all are. And so if those prices go up, our prices go up as well. The other thing I will say is, from the beginning of this budget cycle to where we are today, we cut close to $100,000 worth of expenses. So we did cut very drastically a lot of the things that were planned. Probably the biggest of which was our road maintenance. And yeah, that's kicking a can down the road that we're gonna have to pay at some point. So I think it's important for us to just understand that, the city has to pay those expenses too, and we do as a council, and I'm gonna give credit to Chris and the mayor for really doing the hard work behind it, but they cut a lot out of this year's budget, again, in an attempt to keep it as low as we possibly can.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else have anything?
Brett?
Oh, yeah, Aaron, please.
Chris, I'll address this to you. So in the video, Glenn said on the water, depreciation was $100,000, I think. But the way it was phrased in the video was that money's being put into savings. That's not normally how I think of depreciation. depreciation as opposed to a capital outlay that's then being allocated through the year. Could you explain what's really happening with that?
Yes, what we're doing is we're funding depreciation, so we're taking a chunk of the depreciation that the water system's having and actually using the revenues from the water account, putting it into a savings account. So we're doing a funded depreciation is what we're calling it.
Which, sorry, if I can add just a little bit to that. The water system's actually something that's pretty easy to do that math on, because you know about how long the lifespan is of the pipes. You know, how much you're collecting, and you can approximate how much it's going to cost. And to give previous councils credit, we've actually been doing this for probably 20 years, where we've been funding depreciation. That's why we had $700,000 in there. The piece of that puzzle that was not taken into account was how much construction costs were gonna go up. So while they were funding depreciation at the rate that they thought it was going to be back in the 2000s, construction costs in Utah have increased dramatically, and so our fund was woefully funded. But again, I don't blame previous councils for that. There's no way any of us could have anticipated that particular increase.
Mayor, can I ask a hypothetical?
Yeah.
This is really, really a hypothetical. Because I think we'll be in there.
We could use one.
If for some reason our legal fees go down and we've cut $100,000 out of the budget, I'd like to hear from each council member where that money would be applied to. Got $100,000.
Well, for me, one of the focuses, we met a lot as a council and went over the budget a lot and looked at the numbers and looked at proposals of where to cut the money. And one of my biggest concerns was taking the money out of savings. Now, cities can only have so much in certain types of savings accounts, and then you have too much or you have too little. So last year, we were able to pull some out, and that kept the taxes from going up, as Glenn explained. So we took $276,000 roughly out of savings. One of my focuses was not taking any out this year, because if we were to do that again, then we would be kind of at a critically low point, and then if we had an emergency, what do we do? So for me, if I had that 100,000, I would put it into there or into a pass-through account so that the next year we could either lower taxes or not have to increase them with increasing costs. I'm not sure how that works, Chris, but whichever account we could do so that it was saved for the next year, or put it back into roads if we needed it. Like if something came up and we needed it for roads, then certainly an emergency in the city, that's where I would use it.
This is a short mic. I think for me, I'd probably put it right back to where we cut it from. We took massive cuts from Public Works, and I would probably reallocate it back to Public Works, with a very cognizant plan of how we can probably mostly help with roads, things of that nature.
I love our savings accounts. There's nothing wrong with putting extra into these accounts that fund future projects, so I'm for that. I also think that the city has gone a long time without having enough covering over their equipment. And at least a three-sided lean-to down at the salt shed or something like that we can put things out of the sun. I think that would save sun beating down on some of our equipment. I'd get a chunk for the fire department for anything they needed. That's one of the things I think about all the time is how do we keep our volunteers smiling? I think they respond and do many, many hours of service, and I'd like to make sure they have good equipment and that their equipment works and that they're happy people to continue serving with us.
Yeah, I that last bit, last year we were going to cancel the Fireman's Appreciation Dinner. And until a resident was willing to fund that, and if I've learned anything over the years, it's if you take care of your volunteers, a lot of other problems go away. And I feel really strongly that we need to take care of the people who volunteer and care so much for this city, that they're willing to put their own time and energy into it. Having said that, I believe there's 5 critical services that the city delivers: roads, snow plowing, fire, water, and now sewer. Anytime you have any kind of excess, if you want to call it that, it's not really an excess, but if you have money left over, the smartest thing you can do with that fund is to invest it in one of those 5 critical services in a capital improvement. So in the case of this $100,000, I would absolutely put it right back into roads. Because if we can pay for the roads and if we can get them improved now, that gives us a benefit, meaning we don't have to do it next year. The same thing is true with these savings accounts, and that's part of the reason why we have those savings accounts. They're in the 5 different categories. And those savings accounts are an attempt to make sure that we're paying as we go into those accounts so we don't have to do a big tax increase in the future. So that's how I would spend money.
Jody, is Carrie on, and just, can we hear from her?
I'm gonna try, but it's gonna be somewhat difficult because it's just gonna be coming through my, computer.
Okay, well, and if it doesn't work,
We can have her talk on the phone.
She just froze.
okay.
That's what happens when you record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea. I can just,
We could call her
ring her up
and
and
then
hold
put
her
her on
up
the
against the
microphone.
microphone.
Yeah, right now she's frozen.
I was like, who can call her fastest?
It's cold up there.
Yeah, she's frozen.
Alright, I was sent the voicemail.
Yeah.
She wants to call.
Microphone's in there.
No, I got it.
There you go, Carrie.
I heard I was frozen, so I'm calling it. I agree fully with the other council people. I think that we need to reinvest in the infrastructure costs that we have removed, especially roads. I hear an echo, so I'm slowing down.
Are you muted there on your computer?
Yes. But maybe, let me see. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I turned it off totally on my side. You know, we've cut so much out of the budget to try to stay within our means. We have, those savings account or rainy day account funds so that we can have adequate protection if there is an emergency. But at the same time, you know, although this is a hypothetical question because we don't see our legal fees going away anytime soon, I do think that overall we would want to reinvest those funds in those critical infrastructure funds that David were talking about, those things that we have to have to sustain our city. So that's where my vote would go.
Thank you, Carrie.
Okay, well, I appreciate everyone's questions and input.
Any questions?
Okay, well then we will bring to a close the truth and taxation hearing. And we'll move directly into our city council meeting, but for those who are just here for this portion, thank you for coming. And again, if you have any questions, we're all only a phone call away. Thank you. All right, well, no one's leaving, so.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. I'm disappointed nobody else.
Like anonymous things. Those were exciting.
All right, well, we will now call to order tonight's city council meeting. Councilmember Hilliard, if you would be so kind as to lead us in the pledge. Okay. When the flag gets here, Councilmember Hilliard will lead us in the pledge, and then Councilmember Kinnison, if you would offer the invocation.
Please rise and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to meet as a city this evening and discuss things that are important to us. We are grateful for the citizens that are concerned and are willing to input and give the city better ideas and support. We are grateful for all of our citizens, and we ask your blessing on any of those who have a special need or a special case that they need assistance. We're grateful for those that serve in our city, for our mayor and for our employees and for all those who volunteer and give their time to help us build and maintain a better city. We're grateful to live here on this beautiful mountain. We ask thy blessings to help us make good decisions and to do that which is best for all of us and for our community. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, so now we will have the public comment portion of our city council meeting. And just as a reminder, public comments will be limited to 2 minutes or less. Comments submitted via email need to be submitted to cityclerk.pm. Email comments will not be read during the meeting, but will be included with the official records. And we did get an email from a resident that did express concerns and protested the proposed change in taxes that we'll be discussing tonight. So anybody that would care to make a comment in this meeting?
I protest.
Yeah, amen.
Talk to Nebo.
Jody gave a really good example on,
Jen, you wanna speak in the microphone?
I don't remember it exactly, but Jody did a breakdown, and then she gave a really good example of, the tax increase, and I think it was, she said if her taxes went up $300, of that 365 went to the city, the rest goes to Nebo and the county. So even though we're proposing a little bit of an increase, it's so minute of how much they are actually going up. Like mine are going up $600, it's crazy. But, you know, just a small portion of that actually goes to the city. And if we didn't have the legal fees, we would actually have extra money, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, then we will close the public comment portion, and we will move to the only item of business, resolution adopting the certified tax rate. So,
Do we have a resolution that we're gonna be hearing? Or is it-
Yes, it's in your packet, Mayor.
okay.
Blue tab.
Okay, this does not have the blank filled in on the certified tax rate.
Yeah, the amount,
What was that?
the amount.
Yeah.
Just the rate.
The rate. You might just stand here while I read this, okay. All right, resolution number 2022-24. A resolution setting the Woodland Hills City's 2022-2023 certified tax rate. Whereas Woodland Hills is required by state statute to adopt a certified tax rate, and whereas Woodland Hills City has complied with all legal requirements, now therefore be it resolved, the Woodland Hills City certified tax rate be set at, should I, that's a decimal?
Yes.
Okay, so 0.003210. In accordance with the attached certified tax rate and summary and worksheet as prepared by the Utah County Auditor's Office. So,
I'll make a motion.
okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Hilliard. Okay, and a second by Councilmember Kinnison. All in favor? I guess this would be a roll call vote, right, Jody? Okay, Councilmember Lund.
Yes.
Yes. Councilmember Hilliard?
Yes.
Okay, she's on there. Okay, Councilmember Malkovich?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Kinnison?
Yes.
And Councilmember Pratt?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. And actually, I would recommend that we go into a closed session to discuss legal, so,
Make a motion that we go into executive session
okay.
for the discussion of potential or ongoing legal matters.
Okay, a motion by Councilmember Pratt,
I'll second it.
and a second by Councilmember Lund. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, well, we will be entering into a closed session. Thank you all for being here, and we appreciate your time.
But our residents that just got here, did you want to come and ask us any questions? I feel bad they just got here.
Back on?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So that concludes our closed session, and now we can get a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Councilmember Pratt, motion to adjourn,
I'll second it.
seconded by Councilmember Lund. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thanks, Gary.